When you pass through the flames, you will not be burned. Isaiah 43:2. The night air was thick with smoke and the crackling roar of timbers collapsing. I stood barefoot on the sidewalk, wrapped in a firefighter's blanket, watching my home, the place where memories were woven into every corner, turn to ash before my eyes. The sirens wailed in the distance, mingling with the frantic shouts and the relentless hiss of water. The fire took everything: my wedding photos, my son's letters, every painting I'd ever made. It felt like the very fabric of my life was unraveling in the choking smoke. But amid the devastation, I felt something strange, a warmth that wasn't from the flames themselves. It was the refiner's fire, purifying, testing, and strangely comforting. God wasn't in the flames. He was waiting in the ashes. I bent down and picked up a half-melted miraculous metal from the debris, its edges scorched but still shining faintly in the dark. In that moment, I knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of something new. Store up treasures in heaven. Matthew 6:20. Before the fire, my life was simple but full. I lived quietly in a small house, nestled between rows of vegetable gardens and flowering bushes. The hum of bees and the scent of earth were constant companions, grounding me in the rhythms of nature. My days were spent teaching art at the local prison, a place where hope often seemed scarce, but where I sought to plant seeds of faith and creativity in the hearts of those who had lost their way. The walls of my home were lined with hand-painted icons of saints, each brushstroke a prayer, each color a testament to faith. These paintings were my treasures, as precious to me as the wooden tools my husband crafted with patient hands in his workshop. Our home was modest, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the quiet beauty of everyday life. I wasn't wealthy in the worldly sense. Our riches were measured in small joys: the soft purring of the foster cats I cared for, the taste of fresh tomatoes from our garden, the quiet satisfaction of a brush-meeting canvas. I found peace in these simple gifts, believing deeply that true wealth is stored in heaven, not in bank accounts or possessions. Each day was a blessing, each moment an opportunity to give thanks. Faith was woven into the fabric of my everyday life. I lit candles for strangers' intentions, whispering prayers for those I would never meet, but whose burdens I carried in my heart. On my walks to the bus stop, I left small packets of art supplies with notes that read, "Create something beautiful today." It was my way of sharing hope and beauty with the world, one small act at a time. These gestures were humble, but they connected me to a larger community of kindness and grace. There was a ticking clock, though, a practical concern beneath the spiritual rhythm of my days. Every brushstroke, every prayer, was underscored by the hope that this celebration would soon come to pass. It was a future event that kept me moving forward, a light on the horizon during difficult times. My husband's woodworking tools sat neatly in the corner of the workshop, silent now, but once alive with the sound of saws and hammers. They were reminders of a life built with care and love, a legacy I hope to preserve even after the fire. His craftsmanship was a testament to patience and dedication, qualities I aspired to embody in my own life. These tools symbolize the foundation of our family, the work of our hands and hearts. Though my life was modest, it was rich in meaning. I believed that God's presence was not confined to grand cathedrals or sacred relics, but lived in the ordinary moments: the planting of a seed, the sharing of a meal, the quiet offering of a prayer. It was in these small, everyday acts that I found the sacred. The garden I tended, the meals I shared, the art I created, all were expressions of a deeper faith, a living connection to the divine. I often reflected on the saints I painted, their serene faces and gentle eyes, reminding me of the virtues I wished to cultivate: patience, humility, and love. Each icon was a meditation, a prayer made visible. Through my art, I felt a closeness to God and to the community of believers who had gone before me. It was a source of comfort and strength, especially during times of trial. As I prepared to face the trials ahead, I held on to this belief tightly. The treasures I stored were not of this world, but of the heart, and in that, I found strength. I knew that no matter what hardships came my way, the faith that had sustained me would continue to guide me. The fire might take my home, but it could not take the faith that lived within me. In the quiet moments before dawn, I would sit by the window, watching the first light touch the garden, and whisper a prayer of gratitude for the beauty that surrounded me, for the family I loved, and for the hope that sustained me. These prayers were my anchor, steadying me against the storms of life. The community around me was woven with stories of resilience and grace. Neighbors shared their own struggles and triumphs, reminding me that I was not alone. Together, we celebrated the small victories and supported one another through loss. This sense of belonging was a treasure beyond measure. Looking back, I see how these simple, faithful days prepared me for the journey ahead. The fire would test me in ways I could not yet imagine, but the roots of my faith were deep. They would hold me firm when everything else seemed to fall away. And so, with a heart full of hope and hands ready to create anew, I faced the future, not with fear, but with trust. Trust that God's promises are true, that treasures stored in heaven endure forever, and that even in loss, there is the seed of new life. But as the check bounced back, I felt the first tremor in my faith, a warning of the storm to come. Cursed is the man who trusts in mere flesh. Jeremiah 17:5. The fire had taken everything I held dear: my home, my memories, my sense of security. The walls that once echoed with laughter and prayers were now reduced to smoldering ruins. The photographs, the paintings, the simple comforts of daily life, all gone in a matter of hours. Yet, in the midst of this devastation, I still held on to a fragile hope that the insurance claim would bring some relief, a chance to rebuild, to start anew. That hope was the thread I clung to, the promise that life could continue beyond the ashes. I noticed a thin, gray stray slipping between fence boards each evening, its curious eyes reflecting my own uncertainty. But that hope was shattered the day the insurance investigator arrived. He was a stern man, his face set in an expression of cold professionalism. His eyes were unyielding, scanning the charred remains with a detached gaze. I watched as he moved through the ruins, taking notes, snapping photos, asking questions that seemed more like accusations. After a brief inspection, he delivered the blow that crushed my spirit. The fire was caused by negligence. Faulty wiring I had reported for years, but that had been ignored by those responsible for maintenance. According to him, I was responsible for the damage because I hadn't fixed the wiring sooner. The claim was denied. I was stunned. Years of faithful payments, years of trusting that this safety net would catch me in times of trouble, unraveled in a single sentence. The very institution meant to protect us, to offer a shield against life's unexpected disasters, had turned its back. I felt betrayed, not just by the insurance company, but by a system that seemed designed to fail those who needed help the most. The denial was only the beginning of my losses. The temporary shelter where I had found refuge after the fire closed its doors after just a few weeks, leaving me without a roof over my head once again. The cold reality of homelessness settled in, a harsh reminder that the world moves on even when you are left behind. I reached out to my sister, hoping for family support, a familiar hand to hold in this time of crisis. But she refused. "You always were careless," she said coldly, her voice devoid of compassion. "Maybe this is what you deserve." Her words cut deeper than the fire's flames. The woman who once shared childhood memories with me, who knew my struggles and joys, now turned away, leaving me isolated in my darkest hour. I felt the sting of abandonment, not just from institutions, but from those I thought I could trust most. The loneliness was suffocating, a heavy cloak that settled over my heart. The spiritual wounds were no less painful. A neighbor, once friendly and warm, whispered behind my back, "Maybe God's punishing you for painting those idols, all those saints and pictures." The accusation stung like a lash. Was my faith, my art, the very thing that brought me comfort and connection, now a source of judgment and scorn? Had my devotion become a reason for condemnation? I wrestled with doubt and despair. Had I placed my trust in the wrong things? Was my love for beauty and faith a sin? The fire had burned my home, but these words threatened to burn my soul. I found myself questioning everything I had believed, everything I had held sacred. The silence of God felt deafening. The prayers I had whispered in the quiet of my studio seemed to vanish into the void. Yet, even in this valley of betrayal, a small voice inside urged me to hold on, to remember that God's love is not measured by human judgment, that grace can be found even in ashes. I clung to that hope, fragile as it was, knowing the journey ahead would test every ounce of my faith. In the days that followed, I wandered through the remnants of my life, touching the blackened wood and scorched earth, searching for meaning in the ruins. The world around me moved quickly. Neighbors returned to their routines. The seasons changed, and the sun rose and set as if nothing had happened. But for me, time seemed suspended, caught between loss and longing. I sought solace in the small things: a stray cat that visited the site, a breeze that carried the scent of rain, a single wildflower pushing through the cracked soil. These glimpses of life amidst destruction reminded me that God's presence was not absent, but hidden, waiting to be found in unexpected places. I also found refuge in the memories of my husband's woodworking tools, stored safely away before the fire. They were a tangible link to a past filled with love and craftsmanship, a reminder that creation can rise from destruction. These tools became symbols of hope, inspiring me to believe that rebuilding was possible, even if the path was unclear. The betrayal by the insurance company and the coldness of my sister weighed heavily on my heart, but I refused to let bitterness take root. Instead, I focused on the quiet acts of kindness from strangers. Nay, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. The nights were the hardest. I slept in a donated tent pitched on the blackened earth where my home once stood. The fire had taken everything: walls, roof, memories, but the land remained, scarred and silent beneath the stars. Wrapped in a thin blanket, I listened to the wind whisper through the charred trees, feeling utterly alone. The vastness of the night sky above only deepened the ache in my heart, a stark reminder of how small and vulnerable I felt amid the ruins of my life. Each night, the darkness pressed in, and with it came a flood of questions and doubts. I wondered if God had truly abandoned me, if my prayers had gone unheard. The silence was deafening, and the loneliness was crushing. I longed for the comfort of familiar walls, the warmth of a home filled with light and love. But all that remained was this fragile tent, a temporary refuge in a world that seemed to have turned its back on me. One evening, as the sky darkened and clouds gathered, rain began to fall. At first, it was soft, a gentle patter on the tent's fabric. But soon, it grew steady and insistent, drumming a relentless rhythm that seeped into my bones. From my bag, I pulled out a sketch I had salvaged, a delicate drawing of the Sacred Heart, one of the few remnants of my art that had survived the blaze. The paper was thin and fragile, and as the rain touched it, the lines blurred and dissolved, the ink bleeding into the paper like tears. That same cat, which I'd been feeding scraps for days, padded softly into the doorway, clutching something metallic in its jaws. I held the sketch close to my chest, my heart breaking anew. Was it a sin to love ordinary things too much? Was beauty my idol, the very thing that had brought me comfort now turned against me? I whispered a raw, trembling prayer. God, was I wrong to cherish these gifts? Have I lost your favor because I loved them? The silence that followed was heavy, pressing down like the weight of the night itself. I felt forsaken, abandoned in the ashes of my life and faith. The questions swirled in my mind, threatening to swallow me whole. Was my devotion misplaced? Had I been foolish to believe that God would protect what I held dear? Yet, just as despair threatened to consume me, a small movement caught my eye. A stray cat I had fed in better days appeared at the tent's entrance, its fur damp, but eyes bright and alert. In its mouth, it carried something, an object half burnt but unmistakable. It dropped a charred rosary at my feet. I knelt, fingers trembling, and picked up the fragile beads. The scent of smoke lingered, but beneath it was something else, a quiet reminder that even in destruction, grace remains. The rosary, though damaged, was whole in its purpose, a symbol of faith that endures beyond the flames. That night, as the rain softened and the stars peeked through the clouds, I felt a flicker of hope. The rosary was a sign, a message from God that I was not alone, that amidst the ruins, His presence endured, unseen but steadfast. Though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, I resolved to keep walking, to seek light in the darkness, to hold on to faith even when words failed me, and to trust that from these ashes, something new could rise. The journey would be long, but I was no longer without hope. By the time the neighbors' accusations echoed in my mind, I was already teetering on the edge, ready to either fall or find new heights. Behold, I make all things new. Revelation 21:5. In the weeks after the fire, I found myself sifting through the ashes of what was once my home. The charred remains were a haunting reminder of all I had lost. But as I carefully moved through the debris, I was determined to find whatever fragments of hope might still remain. It was during one of these solemn searches that I stumbled upon something unexpected. A heavy, fireproof safe, half buried beneath the rubble. It was my husband's, a sturdy relic of his careful craftsmanship, designed to protect valuables from disaster. My heart pounded as I pried it open, and inside, to my astonishment, were the deeds to our land, documents the insurance company had somehow missed. This discovery was more than just a legal lifeline. It was a divine clue, a tangible sign that God was at work even in the midst of ruin. The safe, untouched by the flames, felt like a message. Though the fire had consumed our home, the foundation remained secure. With these deeds in hand, I had a new hope, a way to reclaim what was lost and begin the slow process of rebuilding. Not long after, another unexpected blessing arrived. A former student from the prison art classes I taught tracked me down. He was no longer the uncertain young man I remembered, but a confident leader running his own construction crew. "You believed in me when no one else did," he said quietly. "Now, I want to help you rebuild." His words were a balm to my weary spirit, a reminder that the seeds of faith and kindness we plant often bear fruit in ways we cannot foresee. This encounter felt like a whisper from God, an invitation to trust in His plan. "You painted my saints," I heard in my heart. "Now let me paint your story." It was as if the saints whose faces I had lovingly rendered were now guiding me through my own trial, helping me to see that my story was far from over. With renewed courage, I began to envision a future where beauty could rise from ashes, where loss could be transformed into new life. The revelations I received were not just about rebuilding a house, but about rebuilding hope, faith, and community. God was making all things new, not just in the physical world, but in my heart and soul. This revelation was a turning point. It reminded me that even when everything seems lost, God's grace is present, quietly working behind the scenes. The fire had taken much, but it could not take the promise of new beginnings. As I held the deeds and listened to the encouragement of those around me, I felt a deep peace settle over my heart. The path ahead would be difficult, but I was not walking it alone. God's hand was upon me, guiding each step, painting a story of redemption and hope. "Do not fear, for I am with you." Isaiah 41:10. With the deeds to the land safely in my hands, a renewed sense of hope and determination began to blossom within me. The road ahead was still uncertain and fraught with challenges, but I was no longer paralyzed by despair. Using the land deed as collateral, I set out to secure a loan that would allow me to begin rebuilding, not with grandeur or haste, but with careful, deliberate steps. The first priority was to build a tiny home, a modest shelter that would provide a safe haven for my beloved cats and foster animals, who had been my steadfast companions throughout the darkest days of loss and loneliness. This small sanctuary was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of new beginnings, a tangible sign that life could take root again, even after devastation. Securing financing for a tiny home was no simple task. Traditional mortgage lenders were hesitant to approve loans for dwellings that did not conform to conventional housing standards, especially those built on wheels or without permanent foundations. I explored a variety of options: personal loans, RV loans, and home equity lines of credit, carefully weighing the pros and cons of each. The process demanded patience, persistence, and a willingness to navigate unfamiliar territory. Yet, the promise of a warm, secure place for my animals and a foothold for my own rebuilding efforts kept me moving forward, step by step. As the tiny home began to take shape, I realized that my journey was not just about restoring my own life, but about fostering healing within the broader community. I began hosting ash art workshops for fellow fire survivors, inviting them to join me in transforming the remnants of destruction into expressions of beauty and hope. These gatherings became sacred spaces where people could come together to share their stories, their pain, and their resilience. Using charred wood, scorched paper, and other salvaged materials, we created art that spoke of endurance, grace, and the unyielding human spirit. The workshops were more than just creative outlets. They were acts of communal prayer and healing. Each brushstroke, each sculpture, was a testament to the power of faith and creativity to reclaim what hell had tried to destroy. Participants found solace in the shared experience, discovering that even in the midst of ruin, there is the possibility of renewal and transformation. The laughter and tears that filled those rooms were reminders that we were not alone, that together we could rise from the ashes. In the midst of this work, I felt called to extend grace even to those who had caused me pain. I sent the insurance agent who had denied my claim a charcoal drawing of St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. Alongside the drawing, I wrote a simple note, praying you find integrity. It was an act of forgiveness and hope, a reminder that even those who have wronged us can be touched by compassion and change. This gesture brought me unexpected peace, freeing me from the burden of bitterness and opening my heart to healing. Through these acts, building a tiny home, nurturing a community of survivors through art, and offering forgiveness, I discovered a wellspring of strength I had not known I possessed. The journey was far from over, but with God's presence guiding me, each step became a testament to endurance, faith, and the transformative power of love. The tiny home, humble though it was, became a beacon of hope. It was a place where the broken could find shelter, where the lost could find rest, and where new stories could begin. The ash art workshops blossomed into a movement of creative resilience, drawing people from all walks of life to share in the healing power of beauty born from ashes. And the simple act of sending a drawing to the insurance agent became a symbol of mercy's reach, reminding me that grace is not limited by circumstance. As I stood outside my tiny home one evening, watching the sun set over the scorched earth, I whispered a prayer of gratitude for the strength to rebuild, for the courage to forgive, and for the hope that carried me forward. Though the fire had taken much, it had not taken my faith, my spirit, or the promise of new life. God's whisper echoed in my heart, "Do not fear, for I am with you." And with that assurance, I stepped boldly into the future, ready to serve, to create, and to love anew. You intended evil, but God intended it for good. Genesis 50:20. After years of broken promises from that insurance company, seeing the courtroom gavel fall felt like divine justice mirrored on earth. The road to justice was long and winding, but it began to turn when an investigative reporter took an interest in my story. She had heard whispers of insurance fraud surrounding the company that had denied my claim and many others like mine. With determination and courage, she dug into the tangled web of deceit, uncovering evidence that the insurance company had knowingly rejected legitimate claims to save money. Her exposé was published in the local paper, shining a harsh light on the injustice that had devastated so many families. The public outcry was immediate. Pressure mounted on the insurance company, and eventually they were forced to pay my claim in full, along with punitive damages for their bad faith. The victory was bittersweet. No amount of money could erase the pain or the loss. But it was a crucial step toward restoration, a tangible sign that truth and justice could prevail, even in the face of corruption. With the financial burden lifted, the community rallied around me in ways I had never imagined. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers volunteered their time and skills to help rebuild what the fire had taken. What began as a small effort grew into a movement of compassion and solidarity. Together, we transformed my land into what we called Resurrection Gardens, a collection of tiny homes built to shelter families displaced by fires and other hardships. Resurrection Gardens became more than just a housing project. It was a symbol of hope and renewal. Each tiny home was crafted with care and love, a testament to the power of community to heal wounds and rebuild lives. Families who had lost everything found refuge here, surrounded by neighbors who shared their struggles and dreams. The gardens blossomed with flowers and laughter, a living reminder that from destruction, life can flourish. One of the most profound moments came when a skeptical neighbor, once distant and doubtful, approached me with a small jar of paint. "I want to help," she said quietly. "Teach me to see God in broken things." Together, we began to paint an icon of Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, the lily of the Mohawks, whose story of resilience and faith resonated deeply with our community. That icon became a sacramental moment for us all, a visible sign of God's presence amid brokenness. As we worked side by side, the neighbor's eyes softened, her heart opening to the grace that had carried us through. It was a reminder that redemption is not just about rebuilding structures, but about healing souls. Through the journey of justice and redemption, I learned that God's purposes often transcend human intentions. What was meant for evil, the fire, the betrayal, the loss, was transformed by grace into something good and beautiful. The pain I endured became the soil from which new life grew, nourished by faith, community, and love. As Resurrection Gardens flourished, I found peace in knowing that my story was part of a larger tapestry. A story of suffering turned to hope, despair turned to joy. The journey was far from over, but the path was clearer, illuminated by the light of God's unfailing mercy. Though the fig tree does not bud, yet I will rejoice in God. Habakkuk 3:17-18. The rain pattered softly on the tin roof above, a gentle rhythm that mingled with the quiet purring of cats nestled nearby. In the stillness of the room, I sat with brush in hand, painting an icon of the phoenix rising, its wings unfurling from the ashes, a timeless symbol of resurrection and hope. The charcoal I used came from the very remains of my burnt home, transformed by faith into sacred paint. Each stroke felt like a prayer, a declaration that life emerges from death, that grace is born in the midst of ruin. I once thought God lived only in the stained glass of cathedrals or in the solemn silence of sacred spaces. But I found him in the chaos, in the firefighter who wept with me as the flames consumed my home, in the stray cat who brought me a half-burnt rosary, in the ashes that became my pallet. Hell takes what it can, but resurrection, That's God's signature move. The phoenix, a creature of ancient myth and Christian symbolism, embodies this truth. Though consumed by fire, it rises anew, a vivid reminder that destruction is never the final word. This image has long inspired believers, from early Christians who painted it in catacombs to medieval artists who adorned stained glass with its fiery wings. It is a symbol of Christ's resurrection and the eternal promise of new life. As sunlight streamed through the window, it caught the miraculous metal nailed above my door, casting a soft glow that seemed to bless the room. That metal, half melted but still shining, was a beacon through the darkest nights, a reminder that God's grace endures beyond the flames. In this moment of quiet reflection, I rejoiced, not because all pain was gone, but because I had learned to trust in God's faithfulness amid uncertainty. Though the fig tree did not bud, though loss was real and deep, my soul found joy in the steadfast love of the Creator. The journey through fire and ashes taught me that God's presence is not confined to comfort or certainty. It is found in the broken, the lost, the humble places where grace quietly works. It is in the shared meals, the whispered prayers, and the hands that reach out to rebuild. And so, with a heart full of gratitude, I continue to paint, to pray, and to live in the hope that from ashes, life will always rise again. Now, standing not on smoldering pavement but within these gardens of renewal, I feel that same refiner's fire, this time to purify and resurrect rather than consume.